Hey, fellow creepers. We have a ton of awesome things happening now and also in 2020. First, we have a Patreon set up at several member levels. When you join our highest level at $10, you get our awesome logo metal tumbler or glass mug shipped to you for free. And speaking of merch, the logo tumblers and glass mugs will soon be available for purchase on our Facebook page. We'll be adding other items as well throughout the year. We really want to raise enough to make our little show legit and get it trademarked so we can have some legal standing against these copycats. Come join us and help us tell these lazy copiers who has the best Creepin' It Real show. We have tons of content up for all levels of members on our Patreon. Ghost hunts, reviews, and the ongoing saga of Monty's Haunted Libraries and then my best friend's haunted condo. Thanks for listening. Creep It Real.
Welcome to the Creepin' It Real show, your one-stop shop for not-so-serious weird news, TV and movie reviews, and some paranormal shenanigans. We'll also take dives into what's going on in pop culture. You can follow us on Twitter at creepin_it, on Facebook at facebook.com/creepinitrealshow, and you can also shoot us an email at creepinitrealshow@gmail.com. Welcome to Creepin' It Real. I'm one of your hosts, Yardley, and I'm going to bring in my co-host really quickly, Moni from the great state of California. How are you doing?
Hey, we're a little chilly, but it's still beautiful and sunny, so I can't complain.
Blah, blah.
Hey, that's...
We had some rain this week, and my daughter, who of course was born out here in Southern California, was like, when is the rain going to stop? I can't go on the playground. I'm like, it's been one day. You're going to be okay.
Every week. It's nice and sunny. Yeah, it's so great. Well, it's nice and sunny. We just don't want to be on fire.
Hey, they can't pay me for this shit, though. Take down the blood.
At this point, it's nauseating. So how are things cracking up north there, Kristi?
Hey, Yardley. I'm doing good. I'm excited for the holidays. Very excited. And we have a lot of things, travel coming up in my, in our little family. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, it's been rainy and yucky over here, although not freezing. So I guess that's a positive. I don't know. Kind of wish it'd snow a little bit, but otherwise, life is good.
Yeah, I hear you. The weather's kind of been up and down here in the Atlanta area, and it's kind of windy. For the most part, it's been beautiful, even if it's been cold. So I don't really want to complain about that. And in this episode, we're not really going to do weird news today. I just wanted to ask both of my co-hosts the types of things that they've been watching on TV or any cool movies that they've seen. I've watched Eli, which is another Netflix film. It was okay, but we know that the big news over the last week has been, Disney Plus has dropped, and I actually did a free trial and I let it roll over into a regular subscription until this Mandalorian series is over with. But I've been enjoying what I've been seeing, so I would just like to recommend to people, if you have Disney Plus, check out The Mandalorian. And Eli on Netflix, at least the third act, is very interesting. I thought about reviewing it on the show, but then I think I decided not to do that, and I think that what I chose wasn't good anyway. So
I got a question about Disney Plus. Is it?
You don't have it yet?
No. Have you met me? Is it like all just regular Disney movies, or is there like original content? I don't know. Is this
original
what you're
content.
talking about as original too?
Yeah.
Or?
Mandalorian is original, and there's more original content slated to be coming soon. That being said, I do feel you a little bit, Kristi, because they don't have any murder. They don't have, I mean, it's Disney, right?
Yeah.
So I was looking through it, I'm getting itchy. There's no horror here.
Yeah, I can't do
That's
that.
the total to it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it is. The reason why I got the subscription was mainly for The Mandalorian. Then, of course, we know that they have some Marvel TV shows coming out, but a lot of those don't come out for a while. So with me, they definitely don't have enough original content. A lot of the stuff that they have on there are things that if you were fans of it, you probably already own it.
Yeah.
For the most part, this is just kind of a hub for it. But I can definitely say that it's not for us, honestly.
It's for kids.
Yeah.
And teens. I got it for the kids. And at that part, though, it does seem to save a little bit of money because all those Disney films go into the vault and then they're like $25, $30 per movie. They are all curated and right there available. They've got all the Pixar shorts, which some of those are actually pretty freaking brilliant. So those are fun to watch. But
That's
for the most part, it's for kids.
You just order those movies from China like we did. For $1 a movie, except for
a little off.
Except for
it's
that
like
one
Cinderella,
time,
not Cinderella.
Well, one of them was the Lion King, and it had like the cover of the Lion King and everything, and we put it in, and it was a porn, and then I pulled it out and I looked at it, and it said the Loin King, and I didn't realize.
Oh my! Yeah.
Don't.
This keeps that from happening. I will tell you.
That's good. That's probably worth the whatever it is a month. So I have my employees are all millennials or Gen Zers. They're kind of right all on the cusp of one or the other, and they're just losing their shit over this because it has all the shows they watched when they were a kid, like these Disney, like the teen shows or the tween shows. So they're all like, oh, it's got blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't, because my kids were either not old enough for that one or too old for the others. So there seems to definitely be hitting a niche there. It's just not, it's missed our household. And I'm really not sad about it, but I am curious, I guess, about what's in there,
It is pretty wholesome for us horror types. It's very squeaky clean.
When are they gonna?
It's definitely a nostalgia bomb. It has a lot of old. It's got the old X-Men, which I thought was kind of cool. I think Gargoyles or something like that is on it. But for the most part, like I said, I mean, if anyone's curious, just do your 6-day trial, and kind of check out what you get. So, Moni, have you been watching anything in TV and movies lately that you'd like to recommend?
Yeah, and I know I'm always the one that watches the least things, but because I do have a couple of trips to some really gnarly haunted locations that we'll talk about after our movie review today. But in the meantime, the one thing that I have been watching is Travel Channel's Paranormal Caught on Camera. Mm-hmm. And I did post about this on our Facebook page, but one of the things that's fun about it is you can watch it and fairly easily debunk some of the things that you see, but you will see, like last podcast on the left, you'll see some podcasters. If you like to listen to a lot of other shows, you see people that you recognize. It's also fun because they have a lot of quote unquote experts that'll be like, that's clearly a demon and we're all going to die. Like it's kind of hilarious how they jump to conclusions, but there's some creepy, and I take it as it could be fiction, some of it, or it could actually be true. But either way, some of the shit that they catch, from aliens to Bigfoot to demons, all kinds of things, is genuinely creepy. So it's fun to watch no matter.
So I saw you recommended, and me, that's like the might as well put.
Yeah.
They might as well put Kristi, play this. And so I enjoyed it. I thought, some of the videos they have of the cryptids, like the whatever the Yeti was, where he was like in his driveway and it was up on the mountain. They were in Utah, and they're getting ready to go skiing, and he was like loading up his car, and he turned around, and there was this way up on the mountain was, in his neighborhood was this clearly like a Yeti or something. And they went up there to kind of put in perspective, like how the size of it was compared to a human. And then they called MUFON, I think it was. MUFON went out there and found footprints and got casts, and you could even see like the toes. And come on, that is, I thought it was pretty good. I can't imagine walking up there in a freaking Bigfoot costume or like dragging one up there and trying to walk around, because it was pretty steep. But I've found quite a bit. I haven't finished the series yet, but I'm enjoying it for sure.
It's pretty entertaining. It's something I put on while I'm folding laundry and doing other exciting
Mm-hmm.
shit. But I've been enjoying it. I kind of want to reach out to her last name is Slaughter. I'm sure that's not really true, but the lady that they have on there, because she looks like she knows a lot of things, and I have some show ideas based off of some of the subjects that they've covered that she's talked about as well. So we'll see what comes of that. But I've been enjoying it.
It's a mecca for show ideas, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I watched 2 movies yesterday I'd like to recommend, if that's okay with you guys. Netflix right now is killing it on the thriller and horror genre in there. I had a really hard time deciding which movies to watch. There's a lot of them in there that meet my they must be 5 stars or more on IMDb rule. And I had a really hard time. I was just sitting there like, I basically went with the 2 that had higher than a 5-point rating to start with, and then I was going to work my way down. The first one was this movie called The Vault. It has Tara Manning and James Franco in it, and I would compare it to like kind of a Twilight Zone atmosphere-ish type. It's bizarre. It's about a bank robbery, but the bank's haunted, and it's out there, but it's pretty cool. I enjoyed it. And then the second one,
sounds fun.
Yeah, the second one I wouldn't classify it as a horror, but more of kind of a really dark Agatha Christie novel. It's called Stonehurst Asylum, and it has Kate Beckinsale, Ben Kingsley, and Michael Caine. And it's a man goes to an asylum like out in the middle of nowhere to learn and study medicine in like the 1800s. And hijinks happen and things go wrong and shit gets real.
Like some haunted asylum shit. Do you mind actually
really
putting
haunted.
it in our show notes? Because I'm home today with no children, and I'm not planning on getting out of bed whatsoever. And I might have to check some of this out.
Yeah, but this one is not a horror or paranormal. It is more of like a bizarre, dark mystery. And it had like really, really high ratings, almost like a 7. And I did really enjoy it.
I mean, it has Kate Beckinsale's hotness, so I feel like that alone.
That one got my husband. He was like walking or like through the room, and he's like stops in his tracks. That's his favorite actress ever. He's like, "Is that Kate Beckinsale?" And I was like, "Yes." He's like, "And here you are sitting here watching a movie with her in it, and you didn't tell me?" And I'm like,
"You didn't tell me." Yeah.
At the time, I still thought it was a horror, so I was like, "It's." Probably not anything up your alley. He's like, anything with her in it is up my alley. And I was like, well, then by all means, buddy, have a seat.
He's like, she is my alley.
Yeah, exactly. She's my alley, my highway, my everything. So yeah, those are the 2 I recommend, and they're definitely worth a watch.
I'm in.
Okay, well, that's what's up. Y'all ready to dive into this review?
Let's dive.
Yeah.
All right, today we're going to review Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, which is currently streaming on Netflix. This movie came out in 2010, and the cast consists of Bailey Madison, who plays Sally Hurst, Guy Pearce as Alex Hurst, her father, Katie Holmes as Kim Raphael. This film was directed by Guillermo del Toro, who I think anybody who is a fan of his know that he kind of has a penchant for putting fairies in some of his movies. A few examples of that is Hellboy 2, and also one of my personal favorites, Pan's Labyrinth. And have both of you seen Pan's Labyrinth?
Yeah, but it's been a minute.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark thing. It's definitely not for children. That was actually a movie that we should probably review at some point. But as stated before, you have the current pop culture iterations of fairies. So Hellboy 2 is an example of that. Pan's Labyrinth just has so many cool visuals, but they also had fairies in it. And like nowadays, when someone mentions a fairy, those are actually the ones that kind of pop in head.
Yeah.
And we also have a series from Netflix. It's called Bright. It has Will Smith and Joel Edgerton in it. And it has a bunch of cool design fairies. And, of course, Noomi Rapace is in that movie. So that automatically makes me a fan. But a lot of the pop culture fairies these days are the things that are kind of course, entwined in our minds because we've been seeing darker versions of fairies pretty much over the last 10 years or so. So when it comes to fairies, I just wanted to quickly ask both of you this. What types of fairies pop in your head? Is it like, for me, early in the days, you thought about a fairy, I thought about Tinkerbell. You know what I mean? I thought about that. That's probably one of the most well marketed, fairies, of course, the cash grab fairy, so to speak. And lately, probably over the last decade or so, people have been kind of flipping what fairies are on their head, like the familiar ones that we introduce to kids in certain stories, and they have kind of projected out a darker version of these. So, are there any particular types of fairies that pop into your head, the ones that are in pop culture currently?
Mine would have.
Go ahead.
Mine was from the movie Legend. I loved that movie when I was a kid. I know it was a bomb and everybody makes fun of it, but when you're a kid and you watch that movie, it's fantastic. And there were fairies in there, and there was the little fairy that ended up being, not a fairy. She was actually like human sized, but when you think of fairy, you think small. And then, of course, you said Tinkerbell. And then, as far as like Tooth Fairy, which is the one that we're going to discuss today, it was the typical little fairy with a crown and a wand, and I always wondered how the hell she carried all those teeth. And that was pretty much my big version of fairies. And then we're talking about fairies that they're showing now, and from what I've read is that's what actual fairies were like created to look like. They weren't pretty, they weren't cute, they weren't these little sparkly little humans. They were what we see now and how they're Del Toro is portraying them now.
Yeah, as a librarian, I'm pretty aware of like the original, Hans Christian Andersen and all these dark fairy tales. And so I knew that fairies, I don't know about physically, but I knew that they are generally at the very best case scenario, very for themselves and very naughty and mischievous, like to just amuse themselves at your expense, basically. Mm-hmm. And I think even if you think about the character of Tinkerbell, yes, she's beautiful. But in a way, that's worse because she's pretty bitchy. If you,
yeah,
she's not a nice, and she's very in it for herself. She doesn't do anything out of the goodness of her heart, and she's beautiful, so she lures you in with, "Look how cute I am," and then she fucks you up. And so it's not really a surprise that fairies are, if you were to take off the sheen, if you assume that they have magic to make themselves look beautiful to the human eye, that they're not very nice creatures deep down.
Well, look at Moni beating down the. I'm pretty sure that we'll kind of see a flip side of that as well during this review. So the movie starts off and we begin at Blackwood Manor in Providence County, Rhode Island. So there's a renowned painter, Lord Blackwood, who we see summoning his housekeeper to the basement where he ends up bludgeoning her to death with a hammer and a chisel. He ends up removing her teeth, and he also removes his own, and he ends up offering them to a mysterious creature down an ash pit within an old fireplace. The creature ends up rejecting the offer of the teeth, and they demand that they only need to get the teeth of children. So Lord Blackwood begs for them to give back his kidnapped son. And he ends up being dragged down in the ash pit by the creatures. Now, I don't know about y'all, because I know Kristi has a thing about things poking in the eyes and all of this. We all have the cringy stuff. But when I see this guy knock out his housekeeper, get on top of her, puts a chisel to her teeth, and then hammers the teeth out, that kind of set the tone for this movie as far as I was concerned, because I was like, if there's going to be more of that, I'm going to be cringing all the way through it, which is something that I do like in these types of movies. But does mutilation of people's teeth bother either of you?
I didn't think it did until I saw this part. I'm like, cool. So now I don't like eyes and the teeth. I've seen people pull teeth out in movies before, but it was more about the way he was doing it. That was like that. like a curb stomp, you know. It reminded me of the what was it, History X or whatever, where he curb stomps that
American
guy.
History X,
American
yeah.
History X, yeah. I mean, same kind of concept, but with a chisel and whatever that was that he was using. Oh, no, that was not comfortable. I actually turned away at the end part of that. I did not want to see that. I didn't realize this was a thing for me, but apparently, yeah, that it was. Oh, it made my teeth hurt just imagining it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I have some thoughts. So I actually saw this movie when it came out in the theaters, and because the marketing was super good. And it also makes me feel old that was already 10 freaking years ago. But anyways, it did make me cringe. And the older I get, the more I don't like watching people get hurt that bad when they're alive still. Like teeth are something, you're still going to have those if you finish killing a person, they're still going to have their teeth available. So that was just like, can't he just finish like knocking her out or whatever before he takes these teeth out of her head? But it did give me hope that the rest of the movie was going to be super hardcore and scary. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it's not.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Definitely agree with you on that front. But yeah, and I think any of us who have been to the dentist, it just makes you think, oh my goodness, how many people died because of teeth issues? And then like if people are like getting their teeth smashed out, like what can you, I think that pain is just crazy because even with the current science, getting things on your teeth sucks. But anyway, after that brutal killing, we end up flash forwarding to present day. So 8-year-old Sally Hurst arrives in Rhode Island to live with her father, Alex, and his new girlfriend, Kim. So they're restoring Blackwood Manor to put it on the market for their client, Mr. Jacoby. Sally is depressed due to her mother and her father's relationship going south, but also her mother kind of forcing her into her father's care, along with the woman who her father chose over her mother. So this little girl in this movie, who is played by Bailey Madison, when you just look at her in the face, she actually looks like she could be Katie Holmes' daughter.
She does,
Totally.
for sure.
She's adorable, and she was a fantastic actress in this. I mean, regardless of your thoughts about the movie, she did really good. I mean, pretending to be afraid of something, that's computerly, is that a word? Is added by computer. As a child, that's got to be tough work. It's hard enough as an adult. I thought she did really well.
Yeah, I think so too. And she looks like what we've seen of Katie Holmes' actual kid too, around the same age.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And earlier on in the movie, Sally kind of mentions how she wasn't really feeling her dad's new girlfriend, Kim. And it kind of disappears for the rest of the movie. Do y'all feel like even the mention of the turmoil between Alex and his ex-wife, do you think that it was even needed? Because I thought that was really play a part later on in the movie as far as the relationship. But
the only thing was just the sense of isolation that kid had no other place to go. As you see that like Alex and Kim are kind of not that great at the whole watching a small child while there's a renovation process going on thing. She tries to call her mom a couple times. Like one time her mom doesn't even answer, and another time her mom is just like, I gotta go, bye. So it's just, I don't know. I think it contributed to a sense of like powerlessness that we have in childhood of our own situation and kind of sadness and all these other things. Also, I just want to mention they got least hot Guy Pearce. I've always thought Guy Pearce was attractive, and he's like such a douchebag in this film.
Yeah,
and
I didn't think he was.
Katie Holmes.
He was not hot in this.
Yeah. No, and then Katie Holmes, like I'm okay with the fact that she's sort of faded out a little bit as someone we see in films.
Yeah. Well, I thought,
but I was just gonna say it just kind of reminded me of Candyman a little bit, where he's got like the hot grad student that he's replacing his wife with, and he thinks she's so intellectual, but really he just likes banging a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah.
I just feel really bad for the kid.
I just wanted to say really quick on the Alex and his ex-wife relationship. I think like it's just a foreshadowing that sets up Sally's behavioral problems probably and troubles because, if you're a parent or an adult and you're looking at her behavior and she sees these things or hears these voices, You're thinking it stems from like her mother's rejection and her new setting, trying to settling into a new home and her behavior problems. She's on medication for some sort of behavioral problem that still is kind of a mystery through the film. And it just kind of singles out Kim as the non-parent who starts to see things differently. Because, we kind of get into that parent trap of just like, instead of trusting what your kid's saying, just, you're, more of like a burden and you're driving me nuts and I'm busy. I got a lot going on. And here you are presenting issues and troubles in my already crazy life. And we're not seeing anything past our own issues. And while they're going through a whole other terror that we're not trusting or believing in. So then there was Kim to kind of step in there and kind of view it from a different point of view.
This is only the second movie that I've ever seen Katie Holmes in. The other one was like one of those Batman movies. So
awful.
I definitely have to defer.
I was okay when they replaced her. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that I knew about is I think that she and Tom Cruise were married and then her and Jamie Foxx was dating or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I really liked her in Dawson's Creek, and she'll always be Dawson's Creek for me. Everything else she's done has been kind of lackluster. I didn't think she was bad in this movie. I thought she pulled it off pretty well. She's a real like girl next door, and so it's just hard to get past that for her to be, but I thought she did pretty good in this one.
Yeah, she's a fine actress. I just replace her with any generic brunette and I'd be just as fine.
She's no Kay Beckinsale.
Yeah, that's true. Who is?
So on the first night of their stay at the house, there's a melodious tune coming from a carousel-styled nightlight that awakens the creatures that are in the ash pit. So Sally ends up playing this carousel that's already in the room, and the sound is traveling through, I guess, the vents, and that's how whatever the creatures are in the ash pit are able to hear it. So the next day, Sally ends up wandering the grounds and finds the hidden basement skylight. So one of the workmen that are restoring the property, Mr. Harris, ends up warning her, along with her father Alex and Kim, not to venture into the basement. But they do so anyway. Sally hears the creatures calling her name, and she follows the mysterious voices to a sealed fireplace. And "Be Afraid" is written in the runes above it. Now I have to ask y'all are here to look at this property, you're trying to buy it, and then you want to sell it to a client. Get it sold to a client. And if someone tells you not to go to the basement, isn't that going to be one of the first things that you're going to decide to do is go to the basement? Because don't you have to do a little self-appraisal yourself?
Yeah,
it just
we watch horror movies though. So.
Yeah.
But if you're buying something, he was like, hey, we're fixing this place up to you. Just don't go down in the basement. I know in all of our heads, the first things we're thinking is there's 30 bodies down there. What's down there? But I think that is interesting because, Sally is a very curious little girl. You know what I mean? I think for me, I have to draw the line at hearing voices, talking to me. You know what I'm saying? From an ash pit. But Sally ends up opening up the fireplace to meet the creatures that she hears and ends up finding one of the old housekeeper's teeth. The creatures quickly prove to be hostile, and they steal Alex's razor and start shredding Kim's clothes. So Alex blames Sally and ends up finding a 19th century silver coin in her possession, which she ended up finding under her pillow after the tooth disappeared from up under it. So Alex and Kim end up heading into town on a business trip, and Sally sneaks to the basement and talks with the creatures. But the groundskeeper, Harris, ends up sending her away and tries to seal the fireplace because obviously Harris knows that there's something going on with that. So the creatures emerge, and it's a bunch of little critters. These creatures, they don't have wings. They do have a few numbers. So they end up stabbing up poor Harris and with scissors and anything that's sharp, apparently, that's in that basement. And he ends up falling out in front of Sally and ends up being hospitalized by it. So Sally's increasingly frightening encounters with the creatures, they end up prompting her father to call a therapist to talk to her. And she ends up drawing a sketch of one of the creatures that attacked her under the bed sheets. Now, Kim ends up visiting Harris in the hospital. He ends up telling her to find the unpublished artwork of Lord Blackwood, which is located in the local library. The librarian reveals the art. Yeah, I know. Reveals the artwork, one of which is of a creature whom they describe as being like a tooth fairy, which every now and again coming into one of their own. So with this information, Kim ends up racing home as Sally is, of course, being attacked by the creatures while having a bath. The creature that seems to be the leader, which turns out to be a transformed Lord Blackwood, ends up proclaiming the creatures will make Sally one of their own. So Kim finds an undiscovered mural that was painted by Lord Blackwood in the basement, and it depicts his son being taken below ground by the creatures. Kim confronts Alex, who's more interested in hosting a dinner for Mr. Jacoby and his friends and not necessarily paying much attention to Sally and some of the things that are literally going on at a dinner table that we're at, which I want to talk to y'all about that scene. But he ends up finally realizing that what's happening when Sally is trapped in the library with the creatures. So he ends up coming to a realization, seeing why all of these freaky things are happening and why his daughter was acting so alarmed all the time. Mm-hmm. And Sally ends up fending them off by using her camera to flash and distract them. So let's go back a little bit. So how did we feel about the way that Sally's father was treating her? Because we know that it was that scene when he was entertaining all of these people. And, you know, Sally was kind of, I mean, I understand why, but it's kind of awkward to me that she could be acting this way, going, you know, all up under the table and doing these things, and the father just kind of cruising through it, not really paying attention. So, I mean, I definitely want to ask Moni how she would have reacted to a situation like that. But how did these scenes kind of play out? I know that we covered a lot of ground, but was there anything that that I just summarized that y'all kind of want to pinpoint on and talk about?
Does anybody want to, like, okay, I know they make it believable in the film, so good for them, but still, part of me, you know that old adage of, like, how many kindergartners could you kill if you had to, like, take on kindergartners?
I have not heard of that.
Heard of that? Yeah.
Is that an old wise tale?
So the thing is like, you know, you have these tiny creatures attacking you. And granted, in this case, they have access to like tools and things like that. But it's still like, I feel like I could just stomp on those things. And unless I got completely overrun, it would be pretty doable to get out of the situation. So I don't know. Part of that is already just like, you're being taken down by these tiny, tiny little critters that just, I don't know, poke at you with stuff. So I don't know. The whole way through, I'm just a little bit like, would we really all be killed, like as grown men and women, by these things?
Hey, I feel that way about Chucky and everything else. Yeah. Like I'm just like,
he's just one. I mean, like, come on, hand-to-hand combat, just punch the shit, you know?
I know, right? And well, let's talk about the in general. Like, these are definitely a different type of fairies. They can't fly and they're in groups. And then also we find out that these fairies, they do have the ability to transform a person that they're taunting, you know, into one of their own. And I did kind of think that it was cool to see that one of the fairies ended up being Lord Blackwood, which was the individual at the beginning, was removing his housekeeper's teeth as an offering to the creatures for his son. So I thought that was kind of cool, but I'm with you, Moni. I mean, you have to totally like roll your eyes in some of these scenes when you're like, first of all, they're not even that fast. And then they're grabbing
like a little fire goes a long way. Even the bug spray, like treat them like a bunch of cockroaches. Come on.
I mean, the bottom of your tin boot should be enough, because they were stabbing people with things like knitting needles and long nails, and I'm like Harris, how are you getting your ass whooped by these little things? But let's talk about like fairy folklore, you know, in general. We found out that these were pretty much iterations of the tooth fairy. Now, there's a lot of there's some sourcing that I did on this, which one was historicuk.com, and of course Wikipedia. So, if you don't mind, Kristi, can you read this excerpt on tooth fairies and their appearances throughout history?
Okay. Separate from Western perceptions of them, there are those who think the tooth fairy as a man or as a bunny, rabbit, or a mouse. Based on different published children's books and popular artwork, one can find tooth fairies have been depicted as a child with wings, a pixie, a dragon, a blue mother figure, a flying ballerina, two little old men, a dental hygienist, a pot-belly flying man smoking a cigar, a bat, a bear, and other animals.
Now, we already discussed a little bit earlier about what we think about, comes to mind with fairies, so we won't, kind of go over that again. But growing up, were both of you, which I'm sure you were, familiar with the tooth fairy, and have you ever left a tooth from the tooth fairy? And if you have, did you get anything?
I did, yeah. I mean, I used to get a quarter when I laid my tooth under the pillow, and then my kids ended up losing teeth, and we made a huge mistake because the first time Madeline lost a tooth, we were so excited. We put $10 under her pillow. And then we realized, we might have to do this all the time. And so we had to and then
that was just an introductory offer.
Exactly.
Can't do that every time.
And then her grandparents would leave her $20 if she was staying with her grandparents. And so there was all this fluctuation of money and trying to explain that sometimes the tooth fairy, or the times we forgot. That was also an interesting way of having to describe, she must have been busy last night, because, sometimes you forget. You got to wait for them to fall asleep. And
then you fall asleep, and
and you got to creep in there. And then one time I remembered the morning of, and I grab the money and I run up to the bed and I hug her. Good morning, which is not normally what my routine is for her. And as I'm hugging her, I'm getting the tooth out of the tray and putting the money under her pillow while I'm hugging her at the same time.
Yep.
It's like Mission Impossible music playing in the background. But yeah, I only got a quarter. And then, you guys out there who have kids or plan to have kids, don't get so excited the first time that you drop a 10 or a 20 and then realize I'm stuck. I have to do this moving forward now because it wouldn't make any sense to them. So anyway, yes, I definitely did. Absolutely. And even when I realized there wasn't one, I still left because I still wanted the money. So it was like, of course.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely done it for myself not for myself. I had it done for me as a kid. I actually had a little special pillow. You put the little tooth in a little pocket or whatever. I think I remember getting bills, but I don't remember how much they were. And then my kid has lost only one tooth so far, so we've done it for her. But now as an adult, you get told as a kid that this little fairy comes in and takes your tooth and gives you money, but you never wonder what she does with the tooth. Yeah. And when you think about it, there's no non-creepy thing that is happening with your teeth once they are taken. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess some people say that it makes up the sand on beaches. I've heard that before.
But
otherwise it's kind of weird. Yeah. And that's kind of gross too, if you really think about it, is your plaque covered tooth is now ground into a million people's sand on the beach.
My son was creeped out by the tooth fairy, and he tried many times to catch him.
He's smart.
Or her. Yeah. I mean, I understand why you would be creeped out by something creeping in your room, taking something that your head is it's under your pillow. So we put it on a tray on the side of the bed or somewhere else because he was not keen on anything being near his head or pillow. I totally get it. I was I never thought of it, but yeah, this would totally creep some kids out.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Now, let's talk about perceptions. And throughout history, there are definitely different perceptions of what fairies do. Moni, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Besides eat your teeth and turn into you someday. Anyway. So, what exactly are the perceptions of what fairies do? During the Middle Ages in England, children were instructed to burn their baby teeth in order to save the children from hardship in the afterlife. Children who do not consign their baby teeth to the fire would spend eternity searching for them in the afterlife.
Jesus.
Man, that's a shitty way to spend your afterlife.
What kind of kid? What kind of tell is that for a kid? God.
Burn your tooth or you'll spend forever searching for it.
Sometimes they accidentally swallow their teeth when in their sleep. And then you're thinking, I'm going to die and forever be searching for my tooth. Like, that's a way to set a kid up for fear and like horror as you move forward as an adult.
Yeah, that's some therapy shit.
No kidding.
The Vikings, it is said, paid children for their teeth because in the Norse culture, children's teeth and other articles belonging to children were said to bring good luck in battle. I have mixed feelings on that. Fear of witches was another reason to bury or burn teeth. In medieval Europe, it was thought that if a witch were to get a hold of one's teeth, it could lead to them having total power over him or her. See, that's what they're doing with your teeth. Of course, in the West, putting a child's tooth under the bed pillow could yield money or more treats, which is probably the reason you lost your tooth to begin with.
Yeah, and it's funny, kind of going back to some of the things that y'all were talking about you do for your kids after they lost their teeth. Why don't y'all just do like the dental travel packs and just like put those under the pillow?
What's that?
Oh, geez. Do you hand those out for Halloween also, Yardley?
No, it's pretty lame, but maybe I could teach them a valuable lesson.
No, Candy, here's toothbrush, kid.
Just now realized what he was talking about. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Dental pack?
I have to totally be the elder. I have to be the elder.
Shove up your ass when they put you in a home and
you're going to get your house. That's a great way to get your house egged, Yardley.
It's more cost effective than putting $10 bills under their pillows, but
way less fun.
With $10, they could buy their own dental travel pack.
What I'm going to do with this? Screw candy and stickers. I'm buying a dental pack for myself.
Of course, that's how all kids think.
Travel pack. So at this point, after all hell is broken loose, Alex and Kim, they decide to flee the house with Sally, but they end up being ambushed again by the creatures and knocked out. So Sally tries to wake Kim up, but she ends up getting ambushed by the creatures, and she's also knocked unconscious. When Sally wakes up, her feet have been tied up with a rope, and the creatures are starting to drag her to the basement for her transformation into one of them. Kim awakens and then ends up going to the basement to confront the creatures. She cuts the rope around Sally's feet, but she gets caught herself in the ropes, and her legs are broken as she struggles to get free. The creatures drag Kim into the fireplace as a distraught Sally crushes the creature, who we find out used to be Lord Blackwood, to death with a flashlight, which is something that she should have been doing from the first encounter of these things. But obviously it took Kim's demise to kind of bring out a little savagery in herself. So Alex arrives just as Kim is being pulled through into the ash pit. And it ends up kind of going into a sequence where, they both kind of mourn her loss. But I have to tell you something. The scene with Kim getting her legs broken, that also had me cringe because it reminded me of the death of Belch in the 1990 It series when he gets pulled through that pipe. And that just always seems like just a crazy way to go, because you're totally not dying, and it's just a really awkward way. Did that kind of bother y'all?
It was.
Well, I thought it was. Please let me die at that point.
Yeah, it was brutal. You know what? I did not think about the Pennywise, the It miniseries. What I thought about when I watched that was that gymnast from Auburn that broke both her legs on her dismount, and I was like, because that is just, man, good. And she didn't die and turn into a fairy. She had to go and recover and move on with her life. I'm like, oh God.
I did feel bad for Sally's character, not just for the leg breaking and the death, but my husband, when we started to watch, he's like, I remember this movie. And I think that Katie Holmes' character, sacrifices herself. And then you watch it and you're like, no, she tries to do the right thing and save her boyfriend's kid or whatever, but she didn't she didn't go like, take me instead. Like,
Yeah.
bitch didn't ask for that.
No.
That's up there with like the Joe Theismann leg break
Yes.
or Alex Smith. It's just those are tough things to watch.
I got to be really honest with you guys and admit that I am a complete dope because I did not correlate the tooth fairies with this at all. Like, at all. Like, until we sat down and I started doing the homework for the notes, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So I feel like a huge dope. I just thought it was like they were after the kids, and then the teeth was some sort of like little sustainable nugget if they couldn't get a child to come down or a person. So it went way over my head. Then also Lord Blackwood went way over my head. I did not know that he was turned into one of the fairies. I did not get that.
That's one of the problems. But see, that's one of the problems, Kristi, is all of those things look the same. So until you actually found out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was one of the mistakes.
They do a lot of stuff. I mean, I know it's Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, but they do a lot of the scary scenes in a lot of darkness, too. It's hard to see what's going on.
Which is why I was kind of giving them a pass on the little things getting people, because it's dark, so you can't see... you can't see them coming at you. So I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, they turn the lights off. You don't know where they're coming from. So, yeah, I could see you getting your ass kicked by them. But that was the only way I could give them a pass of taking down a human, for sure.
Well, absolutely. Now, before we move on to Kim, because we have to, because she's totally obliterated, but the way that she went out, do y'all feel like the story would have been any different, like had she not died? Because it seemed to me that this movie would have all worked the same if she wasn't even in the movie at all.
I think it was PG-13 or something. The only thing it served for me was like, obviously the opening scene that we talked about was like, whoa, and then it sort of was like, meh, all the way through. And then at the end, it's like, whoa, again. It's just sort of like they punctuated, they began and ended with some really gruesome, nasty deaths, and sort of everything in between almost seemed kiddish.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of time passes, and of course, Sally and Alex were mourning the loss of Kim. So we see a segment where they both return to the mansion, and they end up leaving a drawing of Kim that Sally had drawn. And after they leave, a strong draft ends up pulling the drawing into the creature's lair. The entrance is now bolted with brand new metal. And the heroic carrying Kim, who lost her life trying to save Sally, she has been transformed into a fairy, and she's heard convincing the other creatures to stay in hiding because they have all the time in the world, and people will forget in time, and others will come to the manor. I mean, at this point, aren't you throwing dynamite down that hole? Like, y'all got to...
So I'm kind of a douche for just like walking away from this whole thing. Like, I guess I better sell this house. Hello.
Well, I got to say that now that we've had this conversation about the Lord Blackwood or whatever turning into one of the fairies, it answers the question that I had of, was Kim down there like still stuck with her legs all bent backward in the hole, or was she a fairy? Like, I didn't know yet. I was kind of confused. Like, was she still alive down there? What did they do with her? Why is she just still hanging out?
Voice at the end?
Well, I heard her voice.
I feel like she's talking.
But I thought maybe it was just her and her body like stuck in the hole with her legs bent backwards. Like, is she?
Oh, that's much darker. I like that.
That's what I thought because the other fairy that was Lord Blackwood, his voice was different than it was when he was a human. So I was like, why is her voice the same if she's a fairy? So then I was like, but now that we know that that was Lord Blackwood and he was a fairy, so she was clearly a fairy by then. I just was confused as to what exactly she was down there. Clearly she was like the new leader who was telling them what to do, but was she a human still just stuck, or was she like a fairy?
Like if she was that, she'd be like, yo, don't come down here, and if you do, help me.
Yeah, I believe that she was totally transformed into one of them, but that's one of the problems that this that this movie has is just that, you know, I want to know, how do you explain away Kim being missing? Like, what was the, you know, what was the follow up to that?
It doesn't look weird at all that an older dude gets a new girlfriend and then she doesn't come back out.
Well, you know what? It reminds me of It Chapter 2, how when they did the bridge scene, it was totally unnecessary scene because there was no follow up to it. So when you watch the movie, you're like, oh, they just got away with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And no one ever followed up.
Yeah, but I believe that this is one of those situations where you might want to have a little bit of time to kind of see, because you can't explain that away. You know what I mean? So anyway, however they got out of it, that is how the movie closes. And like you, Kim, as you, Kristi, Kim, even had we saw them, I don't even know how we would have been able to differentiate between her
and the others.
Of the fairies. Unless they had her like up on a platform talking. But this was a movie that I went in, and one of the reasons why I clicked on it in general was just because of Katie Holmes. Like I said, I saw her picture, and I clicked on it because I was like, oh, you know what? I remember her from the Batman movie. And honestly, like when you look at like the IMDb score, it's like, I don't think it has too good. I think it's like, I don't know. IMDb is out of 10, right?
Yeah.
I know it was kind of low, but Roger Ebert had actually given it like a 4 out of 5. And then because when I Googled it, I was like, huh.
Yeah. It had a lot of buzz when it came out.
Yeah. And then I watched it and I was like, really? This really isn't all that. But you know what? I'd give it a 6 out of 10. If anything, you'll giggle a little bit in it. I don't know if you'll necessarily feel satisfied by the time the movie is over. But, you know, I thought it was just okay. And if I recommended it, I'd recommend it with a side eye. So, Moni?
Guillermo del Toro is a nice man. I've met him in person, and he's a very gentle, seeming like his vibe is just very affable and very gentle. And so when you see him making horror, you got to kind of think you're going to get a beautiful gothic tale, like physically eye candy, but I don't know that the hardcore element of like that we're looking for as real horror fans is ever going to be prevalent with him. And certainly in the marketing of this film, which is what made me rush to the theater to see it, was, of course I didn't have kids then either. I used to go see more things in the theater, but it looked like it was going to be truly scary, and it's just not. So yeah, I would give it a 6 out of 10 as well. It was acted fine. And again, super eye candy. He always makes everything look so gothic and beautiful. And the only thing I really took away as far as like feeling about it was just kind of that sense of sadness and lack of control over your life that children have, that I think is good to be reminded sometimes. Is like, it's so great to be a kid. You don't have to pay bills or anything, but you have like zero control over your life, and adults aren't going to believe some of the things you're going through or listen to you. So that was really the only thing for me that stuck at all. But yeah, I guess it's worth watching if you've got 90 minutes to kill somewhere, but 6.
Yeah. I'm going to say,
right,
I will give the trifecta. I put a 6 on here as well. I thought that the cinematography, there we go, and the performance of the girl who plays Sally were great. I thought it kept a pretty good level of suspense. It's definitely not a horror movie in the sense that, you know, that what we usually watch, but I really, again, like you were saying with Del Toro, I don't expect horror in the sense that what we consider horror from him. It was, I thought, a good eyeful of, like you said, I kind of compare it to a gothic fairy tale, and almost could be I guess, genred as a kid's horror, because a lot of this, like you're talking about, the powerlessness of kids could be really scary for them to see, you know, if your parents don't believe you when you're going through shit like this. I didn't know this was a remake from a 70s British horror movie. And now I really want to check it out because I was reading reviews and everybody was really brutal on this movie because they were either comparing it to the original one or they were expecting like another Pan's Labyrinth. So, but I mean, I thought it delivered on what it is. Like I said, a gothic fairy tale. And I wouldn't put it in the horror genre because it doesn't have extreme violence. But yeah, I'd give it a 6.
Yeah, I think it had like one jump scare in it, maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, I don't really feel like, look, it's on Netflix, so even if you watch it in pieces, if you didn't have anything to do, I would definitely say check it out. And let's talk about what our next show is going to be. Now, Moni, it's on you, right?
Yes, sir. And I'm already gearing up. I've got some field trips planned, but also obviously I'll be doing some research to talk about famously haunted battlefields of California in general. There's a couple that I'm planning to visit. Hopefully I'll get to. We're gearing up on the holidays and it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But there's a couple haunted places that I'll visit. And one of the places that we're going to talk about that I'll probably go see is San Pasqual, which is the scene of a famous battlefield out here in San Diego. Mexican-American War, very bloody. So I will be going through the history of that. And then any videos that I take will be posted exclusively to our Patreon page, which I hope you support. And the show might not just be battlefields. I do plan on visiting Proctor Valley Road, which is right behind me here in Chula Vista, which is known for being very, very, very haunted with a demon car and monsters and a woman in blue and all kinds of stuff. I doubt I'll get that much action, but again, anything that I do video will be on our Patreon page exclusively, but anything that we discuss and any of the history we will talk about on next week's show.
I'm excited to hear about the demon car.
Yeah, hopefully we'll see it. So, or maybe hopefully we'll not, but I'm not really that worried about it. So.
Okay. I have actually, it's a book recommendation. It's very cheap. So back in 1994, there was this book called Lady Coddington's Press Fairy Book. I want to recommend it because if you're into art, it's essentially it's a book that as you flip through it, there are these cool watercolor photos of fairies that look like they were pressed in the book when you were closing it up. And the art is really dope. And you can get these books new for like $4 on Amazon. But if you like watercolor and you like art and you like fairies, I highly recommend this book. I actually bought this book a long time ago, and I was never into fairies. But when I was looking at those watercolor pictures, I was like, I got to have it, and I still have it. And it's something that's really good for your shelf. It's something that as an adult you can enjoy the artwork, and if you're a kid, it looks really cool because the way that the fairies are splattered and painted throughout it, it just makes you laugh every time you turn the page. But I just want to make a recommendation on that because I know that Moni, you have little ones, and I really do think that it's a cool book. And like I said, it's only it's only $4, so. I'll put the link in the show notes.
I remember checking that book out from the library when I was a kid. I used to love it. The facial expressions on the fairies are so funny because it just kind of throws the personality of the fairy at, with each expression. So yeah, it's great.
I mean, and it's really cool how it's done because it looks like a person was trying to write, about the fairies or whatever in the book. And then while they were writing it, like a fairy was like flying down like on the book. And then so some of the splats, like some of them are like the fairy almost got away, but it like caught the bottom part of it. Or it just smashed them all the way. So Moni, so just check the book out, and it's definitely a cool little thing to add to your collection. And I look forward to next week as well. Kristi, do you have anything before we close this puppy now?
You can follow me on Creepin' at Kristi on Instagram, and I've been getting a lot of followers recently. Thank you for finding me and messaging me. I appreciate it. And you can also interact with us on creepin_it on Twitter. Again, like Moni had said earlier, we have Patreon. We do a lot of extras and videos and start some conversations on there. You can go at 3 different levels, 3, 5, and 10. 10 gets you a wine tumbler or a glass logoed mug. And also share this show with your friends if you like it and want to recommend it. We appreciate that. That's a great way for us to get some new listeners.
And Moni, how can people find you on social media?
I am Moni Bear, MoniBarre, across the board. And like Kristi, I've had an uptick in people following me, particularly on Instagram, and I really appreciate that. So thank you. I look forward to interacting with everybody.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter at militant_marker. And with that, everybody, keep it real.